Trans people are real, and we don't start this process as passing women.
Talking about these things, sharing your process is probably the most important thing that trans people can do. My awakening was probably in Fiesta Online, as I got mistaken for a girl the first time. I had S4 League, and I switched to playing a female character because I liked playing it more because the animations were different, and I just thought I had like a huge advantage by playing a female character because the animations for dodging, etc., were like different. And then I was like looking at the outfits, and I was like, oh, I want to wear that stuff. I want to wear that stuff. And then, like, when I was playing in lobbies, like, people saw, oh, I'm playing like a female character, so people just use she, her pronouns for me. And I was like, why does that feel right? Smaller hitbox? No, not necessarily smaller hitbox. It's just a different dodging animation. Smaller hitbox was me playing Blacklight Retribution. As a kid, I always preferred hanging out with the girls because I just vibed with them. I wanted to hang out with the girls, but like I was always scared to befriend girls because people treated relationships or like friendships between boys and girls differently than boys and boys. And I didn't like these comments like, oh, are you dating? Talking to 8-year-olds being like, oh, you look so cute together. Are you dating? I'm guilty of the still sister meme for most of my life. Yeah. I learned about trans people and I saw like transitioning and I saw that was like an option. And I was like, I'm unhappy with my gender identity, but I just accept it and I just like live my life. I don't go out of my way to like change all these things. Why do they get to do these things? And vibe with girls and boys. I wanted to hang out with the girls, but not as a boy who is hanging out with girls, but instead just be one of the girls, you know? My I'm trans moment was depressing. I think I was more disappointed because I knew it was gonna be hard. Yeah, I get that. I generally just thought every guy wanted to be a woman until I figured out it was wrong and started hiding it. Yeah, me too. That's the problem when you don't have education on trans topics. You're just like, everybody relates to that, right? I don't really feel comfortable with calling myself trans because I'm not open anywhere. Being trans doesn't depend on whether or not you're open about it, or whether or not you pass, or whether or not you did anything about it. It's just like you're either trans or you're like not. I know that if you haven't started transitioning, etc., like you kind of feel invalid. Like I would just support the conservative stereotype of trans women want to invade women's spaces. I only started going into the women's restroom when I stood out in the men's restroom and I blended in the women's restroom. You feel invalid while transitioning because it's not exactly easy to admit to something after needing to hide it for years and years. Yeah, I feel that. There's someone on TikTok. I kind of feel bad for that person because they get like treatment right now. I used to be in that situation too. Let me bring that up.
Heard your feedback. Making a really difficult decision here to keep living my life, the trans woman, regardless of what this girl and anyone else thinks about how passing I am during week 3 of my transition. Making the difficult decision to keep moving forward and documenting this journey despite all of the hate that I might get, because trans people are real and we don't start this process as passing women. You guys can hate on me all you want. It is never ever going to change the outcome of my life, which is that I will be medically and socially transitioning my gender. So I'm sorry that you don't like that, and I'm sorry that that's difficult for you. It's the happiest I've ever been in my life, and I know it's going to be the greatest thing I've ever done.
I really appreciate what she's doing, and I can like relate to this because when I started out, I had people tell me that because I haven't done voice training, etc., I shouldn't do content. I should only start talking about being trans when I actually pass as a woman. I know there are so many trans people who don't feel comfortable with coming out until they reach that step. I can't come out to my online friends because I don't sound like a woman enough. I can't come out to my friends in real life because I don't look like a woman enough. So I'm just taking estrogen and not talking about any of it. You know, standing up to that and like talking about these things, sharing your process is probably the most important thing that trans people can do. I hear that every day from my family. I'm not trans, you don't look like one. Yeah, exactly. It's not a switch. And I think my parents didn't understand it either. It's just really difficult to explain because these people still see you how they want to see you, and they put you into a box despite you stating that you don't fit into that box. It's always like this, oh, I'm sorry for using the wrong pronouns. You still sound like a man. You don't look trans. I came out yesterday. What do you expect? Yeah, exactly. Not socially out because I still look really masked. Only my friends know. That is like a problem for me too, where I'm like, I don't feel like I'm already passing enough for me to do the things that I want to do, despite getting more and more, like, done it correctly. I'm more comfortable coming out to complete strangers than my own family. Yeah, being rejected by strangers is not that harsh that it is when you get rejected by your own family. But yeah, like, I really appreciate what she's doing. And like in the description, I don't use female bathrooms right now. I don't ask strangers to use she, her pronouns. It's just like we realize how we look like at the start of our process in our journey. We realize how we are being perceived by other people, and it's just insane to me that people want to shove us into the closet. Don't talk about being trans, don't talk about anything until you look like a woman, and then also don't speak about being trans because you look like a woman, so you're actually putting yourself in danger. My family still calls me he and all that, and at this point I've just stopped trying to change their mind. Your mom, your son that looks and sounds like that is a guy. It's kind of weird because my dad uses my new name, but he only calls me she, I guess on accident, which is kind of weird. It sucks. And I feel like documenting your journey, like you're going to experience so much hatred, and it's going to be like a really long process, a really slow process, but it's like such an important thing for like trans people. When he's not thinking about it, he genders you by accident correctly. Yeah, exactly. I get that like sometimes it's a habit, but sometimes it just feels like if you call me she and then you correct yourself to he.
Silence, wench.
Okay.
I do not wish to be horny anymore.
I'm sorry. I started making content before I transitioned. Or basically when I started getting like HRT, getting approved for HRT. Started making content before I had voice training. I started making content at a point where I didn't pass. I was just a stereotypical white dude. And I got a lot of hate for it. I got a lot of people being like, oh, you're not putting in enough effort in order to be a woman. Oh, if you're trans, why do you sound like that? It can be really heartbreaking. This was 2nd of December, 2022. This is like old Nyara content. Old Nyara content.
Certain things are really hard to explain to someone who doesn't feel or experience them. Gender dysphoria is one of those feelings. There isn't a good explanation for someone who can't relate to the feeling of rejecting yourself, your body, based on your biological sex. Imagine playing Valorant or League of Legends and you are forced to play a character you're uncomfortable with. You're locked in for 45 minutes playing as that character. People in game refer to you as this character, and it's hard for you to get anything done because you don't even know the abilities or playstyle. You're basically just feeding and have your team insult you. Being trans is similar, but it just never stops. There's no escape to it unless you start going through a long, hard journey with many roadblocks, and everyone around you just makes it so hard for you to just be yourself. You don't even know if it will get any better, but the alternative is being stuck in an endless cycle of misery.
I sounded way more German back then. The biggest difference is like how German I sounded. Is that your voice has changed so much? Yeah. Who is this crypto, bro? Voice is very deep. Now I have more hope about my own chances of developing a feminine voice. Yeah, it just takes time. It just takes practice. The show was depressing as yeah, I'm sorry. That was a lot of my content. So I got a bit of the accent. I doubt I will lose it. I was like at the starting point of like my transition. I was like talking about these topics, and like for the longest time I wasn't comfortable doing like any form of like commentary, like content, etc. because I was so like scared of using my voice. it's just really important to like document your journey. And I know that when people post like their pre-transition and now like 5 years into transitioning, etc. pictures, like I know transphobic people use these pictures in order to invalidate trans people the entire time. But I think it's like really important for someone to just like document that journey. A friend of my brother, when I was like coming out as trans, I was like talking about that. And he actually recommended of me like documenting my journey, but I should like wait until I'm actually like through the process before making content. And I was like, nah, I'm just doing graphic design. I'm just a graphic designer. I work with like streamers, etc. I don't do streaming. I just started to realize it's just so much more beneficial to have people like see the process, to give them like the hope instead of like just being like through it and then being like, oh, these were the results. These are all the steps. I was talking about things that were happening at that moment, you know, while I was doing my legal name change, like the process I went through. I documented all of that stuff. I talked about these topics. I talked about the system. Like, I experienced it. I went through it, so I talked about these things. Even if you don't want to share your journey, if you don't want to post publicly about it because you don't want to deal with the harassment, I think it's still important for you to, like, have some form of, like, documentation. Because, like, if you do voice training, comparing yourself to how you sounded 3 weeks ago is going to feel like, well, you didn't really change much. But if you look back like a year ago, 2 years ago, then you're like, Jesus, this is where I started. You know, sometimes I go back and look at pictures of myself every time I feel bad and I feel like I haven't really made that much progress. And then I realized I lost like 30 kilograms.